We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Free Association Radio. Today's edition is, of course, 11th House Radio. The difference is that today, let me break it down for you. Okay, so Free Association Radio is the worldwide broadcast network. It's the umbrella of Robert Phoenix's radio outreach. And within that vast network, there are two shows that are done here. One is today's show, 11th House Radio, which I almost called Navigating the Astrological Matrix, but I stopped myself. And then the other show is on Fridays, and that is called the Friday Farcast. So there you go, just in case you're new to this thing. This is how it breaks down. But Free Association Radio, of course, is the major international corporate conglomerate, far-reaching mothership of it all. How is everybody today? We are in the 18th day of August. We are almost getting ready to transition into Virgo on the 22nd here. And it's always, actually it's the 23rd, 22nd is the last day of Leo. And these transition dates are always very interesting. The last few days of a sign, as it goes from one sign to another, we get into kind of a fascinating sort of temporal flux where things happen, right? And I've talked about this before, and I've written about this before on the site. When you get to the end of a sign, the energy does a couple of different things. One is that at the final sort of degree, which would be the 29th degree, it is really kind of, it's out. So the energy is gone. It is thoroughly dissipated, and it is actually a crisis point in the chart in some ways, because there is a desire to either go back or move ahead. And sometimes with that 29th degree, it is very difficult. And this is one of the challenges that people who have the 29th degree, he raises his hand, in his chart face. It is this whole notion of going forward, staying in one place, or going back, because the thrust of the energy wants to move the individual forward, but at the same time, they need to kind of stay in that place and they need to complete things. So if you have the 29th degree in your chart, whether it's your sun, your moon, Mercury, whatever it is, whatever area it's showing up in, completion is a big deal. Finish what you start. And this is something I always am going through in my own life, is trying to finish things that I start instead of moving on to the next thing. And the next sign is always the allure. It is always the allure. It is always the golden carrot And so for me, it would be Libra, right? It's like, here's the golden carrot. Here's the relationship. Here's whatever that is, the opportunity or, the experience. And I've got all these planets in Libra, so I got 3 golden carrots sitting in front of me, right? So, but the whole idea with the 29th degree is to sit in one place and finish your assignment. That's what it's about. So we're not quite there yet. Now the degrees just before the 29th degree, the 27th and the 28th degrees are very interesting, because while they are not at that kind of omega point that the 29th degree is, that anaretic degree, they are certainly at a place where the energy, it's almost like, I'll use the analogy, let's say it's like a wounded animal, right? And that animal or human, and it's a fatally wounded human or animal, let's say the energy is being released during that time, during that period. This is what happens around 27, 28 degrees, because it is almost like the final death throes of the sign itself. So there's a great deal of release during the 27th and 28th degrees. And when you get to the 29th degree, it's gone. It's gone. I don't believe you start off with the Big Bang at 0, although everything is potential at 0. Everything is pregnant with possibility at 0. So yes, there's a lot of energy at 0. But I don't necessarily believe it is you start at 0 at the top and you go down and you get to 29, and that each degree there's less and less energy. There is some truth to that, but I feel like that when you get to the final degrees, it's like kind of, okay, I'm going to get morbid here, but if you've ever seen anybody that dies, there is this intense kind of heaving, convulsive action that takes place in the body. This is just before the 29th of the 0 degree going into the next sign. This convulsive energy is the 27th and the 28th degrees. And that's when the life force is literally leaving the sign itself. So when we get down to days like the 20th and the 21st of each month, we need to pay attention from a collective standpoint, but from also a personal standpoint, because these days are drivers. And also, a lot of the time, when we get into those days, we can also see syncs happening with moon cycles as well. So we would need to take that into consideration. Where's the moon at that point in time? Is it going into a new phase? Generally speaking, it should be, because once we get into a new sign, right, then the moon theoretically would be in the same sign. Now, I was born at the end of Virgo, 29 degrees. My moon is in Libra, so it is theoretically a new moon. I was born on a new moon because the sun sign the next day would have been, actually that day would have been in Libra. Had I been born a couple hours later, actually about an hour later, I would have been on Libra. It was that close. An hour later, maybe even less than that, maybe half an hour later, I'm a Libra. So we have to look at the moon cycles as well. But the moon cycles are going to be at that 0 degree, generally speaking. They'll come in. They'll definitely come in and come into play. So we'll be looking at that later in the show when we get into the moon and Venus and Jupiter, the conjunctions and all that stuff. Venus is in Leo. Let's go to the ephemeris. To the ephemeris. So big weekend for sports around the country. I've been watching a lot of the Little League World Series, and it's absolutely fascinating what's taking place there. I'll get into that a little bit later in the show. And it has to do with the Pluto and Sag kids. Okay, here we go. So we got the moon today at Gemini 9, Mercury, Virgo 5. What does that mean? That means, boys and girls, we're in a square. We're in at least right now, we're in a moon-Mercury square. And even though it's interesting, both Gemini and Virgo are ruled by the planet Mercury, they are at cross purposes, right? Because they are mutable signs, and they are 90 degrees apart from each other. Venus is at Leo 7, so it's been here for a minute. We'll get into it. Mars trucking along at 13 Scorpio, on its way to catching up to Saturn. That'll be the 25th. Circle that day on your calendar. We've got an exact Venus and Jupiter conjunction tonight. If you live in a part of the world where the skies are clear, you may want to go outside. If you have a telescope, you may want to break it open because you'll be able to see Venus cuddling up right next to Jupiter in the sky. They're conjunct. You can see it. This is where astrology and astronomy actually embrace. They do a man hug when we see the aspects actually taking place in the sky. So yes, Venus and Jupiter are conjunct. They're right next to each other, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. Saturn is at 17 Scorpio, waiting for Mars to catch up. By the way, that Mars-Saturn conjunction, that has the potential to be very volcanic, tectonic, because we are dealing with the underworld. We are dealing with forces of the underworld, violent forces of the underworld. That's Mars. Saturn being in some ways, the topography and the highest topography of the Earth itself, mountain ranges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Keep your eyes posted on Yellowstone National Park. Uranus, 16 degrees in Aries, and Uranus moving backwards, of course, getting retrograde. Neptune, 6 in Pisces, that's retrograde. Neptune actually winds up going all the way back to 3. That's how far back it goes. And then Pluto, of course, retrograde at 11, sitting in the prime real estate of my second house right on my natal Saturn. Oh boy. Oh joy. What fun it is. The true node is retrograde, and that is at 21 Libra. So we've got all the back end aspects are in retrograde. Even Chiron is retrograde at 16. By the way, I have a new piece on Chiron up on my site, and it has to do with this whole notion of Chiron as being purgatory state. And it feels like that is where we are living at this point in time. You know, one of the things that's happened is that we have, in a lot of ways, taken ourselves off the hook for being accountable for our own actions and our thoughts and our intentions, even to some extent. And as a result of that, we are kind of living in this universe that is almost defined by Crowley's maxim as do as thou wilt, without any kind of guilt or conscience or repercussion for what we do or what we think of at times even. And I feel like that this is starting to come up for people, that this is where we kind of are culturally right now, and that we have to, in some ways, come to a form of, for lack of a better term, reckoning with this dynamic. Because it feels to me like we have skated for a while, and now the skating period is over. And I was actually talking with Katie Galante, and we were talking about how these aspects of karma are happening at a much more rapid rate. So this is kind of what we're going through right now, this acceleration of what's inside of us, both past and present, and how it gets manifest in the world so we can deal with it, and deal with it quickly, because it feels like we're on a fast track here. We're in a fast track to some form of collective and even at times personal judgment. At least that's what it feels like. And, you know, we're all human. And the irony is that, yes, we've given ourselves a wide berth to kind of do what we need to do or follow our bliss or whatever that thing is. And at times, at the expense of, you know, other people or other situations that could be painful if we're unconscious to the process. However, the irony is that if we go into the quote-unquote Christian model, and that there is a God, and that God is actually a personal and transpersonal entity, that we're forgiven for those things. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic, that we're already forgiven for the transgressions that we've done, but at the same time, we need to be conscious and aware of their impact upon others and ourselves as well. So here we are, Chiron in Pisces, and that's where it's all getting kind of acted out. And one of the things that if you go into the internet and you Google purgatory and you look for images, what you'll see is you'll see realms of suffering in a lot of ways. And even though purgatory is not hell, it certainly has its own hellish connotation, in the sense that perhaps nothing ever changes, or perhaps there is a feeling as though one can slip into a decidedly more subterranean reality at any given point in time. And so if you look at a lot of those paintings that depict purgatory, you'll see various states of suffering. It's a bardo. I mean, this is what it is. And hell is a bardo, and our reality is a bardo, and our sub-realities are bardos. And this is what they are. They're psychological thought forms, and they're very powerful, and we've created them to a large extent. We've created them through our thoughts, our feelings, or lack thereof, whatever. And this is what we have. This is what we live with. Our bubbles are our bardos, right? And so that's what purgatory is in a lot of ways. But you look at those paintings, you'll see these symbols and these images, and they're kind of horrific in some ways. Not quite hellish, but certainly indicating suffering. Now you look around the planet right now, and you'll see very easily that there are these images that reflect this kind of purgatory or purgatorio state of being. You look at what's happening in Ferguson, which, by the way, I'm going to get into that again. If you did not listen to Friday's show with myself and Coach Kair Love, go find it. Go find it on the Blog Talk archives. It'll be up on YouTube later this week. It's a really good show. I got a lot of praise and props for that from various people, and they loved what Kair brought to the table, and they really got into our chemistry and our synergy together. And I gotta tip my hat once again to Kair, because he came in and he basically, popped that duality bubble, which is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get beyond this thing, because it's going to kill us, and I can be at times, I don't want to say guilty of being sort of an agent of duality, or somebody who will tap into duality, because at times I do, because at times we have to see the other. Right? We have to see the other. And when we see the other for whatever the other is, then in a lot of ways we can begin to build some kind of relationship to it, right? Like, is the other not self? Or is the other self? And if it's not self, then what? Then what do we do? Right? Then we move. We move to what is self, or what is closer to self, that is connected to source and soul and the divine. So in a lot of ways, we have to play the duality game to define the other. But at some point, we also have to transcend that. And so we are at a transcension moment with what's taking place with duality, because it's very, very important. Now, again, do we turn a blind eye? Do we stick our head in the sand? No, we don't. At least I don't. I want to find out what's going on. I need to know. It's part of my chart. It's part of who I am. It's part of what I do. But then at that point, well, then what do? We got to take it to a higher level. We have to get to a higher level. It's really interesting. Now we're moving into the moon space here. Moon in Gemini. I have some friends on Facebook who are into the Black consciousness movement, the Moorish sovereignty movement, and I find it fascinating. And Paul Moreland, who is a Facebook friend, is right out there. He's right at the forefront. I mean, this guy has, he's waving his flag. He's saying, "Hey, let's get our guns." The other guys have their guns. The Tea Party has their guns. The Patriot Movement has guns. Why don't we have guns? Fact of the matter is, there's plenty of guns out there, and the black community has plenty of guns, white community has plenty of guns. But what he's talking about is he's talking about a formalized kind of militia, right? And so I was thinking about this, and I'm thinking, well, how different is this than the sovereign movement, right? I mean, so the black Moors say we don't have to pay taxes because we're sovereign.
right? We are our own people. We're our own country. We're our own identity. So we don't have to pay taxes. And so essentially what they're doing is they're doing the same thing that the sovereign sort of patriot movement is doing on the other side, right? I mean, it's fascinating to see these two things at work. And to some extent, each one has its own kind of buy-in to its quote-unquote racial or genetic identity. And so for the Black consciousness or the Moorish movement, they see themselves as being connected to kinetic science, and that there's a whole secret history about who they are, where they came from, which has been abrogated and completely abridged and bastardized by the traditional history tellers. And so there's some interesting things in there that they're trying to kind of reclaim an identity. Meanwhile, on the other side, again, we're playing with the Gemini Moon here. On the other side, you have, people like Henrik Palmgren, who are, very strong and very vocal about sort of the Northern European piece that's happening, how the Northern European people are being essentially rubbed out of history. And, I am of Northern European descent, and I am an observer of popular culture, and I'm an observer of geopolitical trends. And I would say Henrik is right on. I mean, he understands it. He gets it. I see it. I get it. Things are happening now where we are being managed in a very, very sophisticated manner. Very sophisticated manner. And I think that both sides are essentially correct, that they don't cancel each other out. And it's a place where two things can be equally true. And so when I read the stuff that I'm reading on FB through Paul's posts and some other posts, I'm saying you guys are not alone. You're not alone. You're fighting for your identity. You're fighting for your place in the universe. You're fighting for your significance in a lot of ways. You're fighting to be taken seriously, and you're tired of being manipulated. Flip the script. Go over to the sovereign movement, to the Northern European consciousness movement. The same things are being said. The same exact things are being said. So what do we have here? We have two poles, theoretical poles of position, and two theoretical poles that are on a surface level. Let's just take it on a surface level. Color alone, diametrically opposed. You dig deeper, and you'll find that there's way more commonality between these two groups than there is on the surface. So then what happens? Well, if we want to bridge the duality, if this group says, well, these are our complaints and our list of demands, and the other group says, these are our complaints and our list of demands, and I would say 7 out of 10 match, then maybe something else has to take place. Maybe a bigger dialogue has to take place. And that bigger dialogue says, well, if we're feeling jacked around and you're feeling jacked around, and we can see that there is manipulation and there's coercion and there is symbolic occult magic taking place to weave this planetary spell over the rest of us, then what are we going to do? How are we going to bridge the gap? How are we going to, in some way, shape, or form, represent our own interests? And look, you cannot, I'm going to tell you right now, genetics and biology are really powerful. They're a lot more powerful than we understand. So we have to honor them in some ways. And to dismiss it and to say, well, we're all one and, it's all, kumbaya and it's a small world after all, is in some ways being incredibly superficial, because biology and genetics are very, very powerful, and we have to honor them. And at the same time, we have to also build a bridge to the greater experience of being human. So I would say that this is an opportunity for people who are like-minded, who see the game unfolding, to get together and start having some conversations. Because this is the opportunity for us to do that. This is the opportunity to say, hey, let me check this. Let me check this. Let me check this. Yeah. Got it. All of a sudden now you've got two separate or disparate groups that are talking together that are coming to the same conclusions. That is power, and that is where change occurs. That's where it occurs. And I'm not going to be dismissive of any of them at this point, because I think they both have some skin in the game. And I'll be honest, skin in the game. So I think this is an interesting time to have a dialogue, because then what happens? And it's like, well, if I'm not doing this to you and you're not doing this to me, then who is doing it to us? Big question mark. That's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets really interesting. So with Moon and Gemini today, we have the opportunity to explore this dichotomy and this duality. Isn't this wonderful how astrology works? So keep your eyes on what's happening in Ferguson, because they are taking that thing and they want to make this into a social and global flashpoint. And it's already happening. It's already taking place. The National Guard have been called in. They've had martial law. Martial law has been activated in Ferguson, and they're going to try to continue to create events that are more and more divisive and pitting us against one another, again, with the Gemini Moon. Anytime you see Gemini, the cycle of Gemini or Aquarius, you've got to keep your eyes open, because this is when the game is accelerated. Somebody sent me an email and said, thank you for doing your show with Greg. I learned a lot from it, and I believe that a lot of the things you're talking about are correct. But if all these symbols are out there and all these hidden in plain sight kinds of cycles are out there, then how come we can't be more predictive about what's going to take place? It's a really good question. I will say this. I will say that with Gemini and Aquarius, whenever they come into play, this is when for lack of a better term, the agenda is pushed and moved forward. So when it's moved forward. Now, is it intentional? Perhaps. Does it have its own kind of social and holographic accelerant and momentum? That could be the case too. I've just noticed that when these two aspects show up in a big way, things get activated. So there is an ability to get predictive around it. Now, Mars moves into Aquarius by the end of the year. And I would say that this is a very, very important time when Mars moves into Aquarius. This is when that Aquarian blueprint, the dark Aquarian blueprint, can get activated, can get accelerated, can get pushed and move forward. So in a broad sense, that's a time when we can look at that time of year and see, like, okay, what can happen? What can take place? Because Aquarius is the key right now. It is the key. It is the key to everything, with the exception, of course, the Piscean stuff. But they're linked because we're going from Pisces to Aquarius. Socially and even mythologically, we're going from Pisces to Aquarius. Everything in our movies represents that right now at this point in time, right? It does. Trust me. Some other interesting stuff. Yesterday, the 49ers opened their season and their stadium for the first time. They played a game in Santa Clara, their new stadium. They no longer play in Candlestick Park. And it's interesting because the last event at Candlestick Park took place just over the weekend. And who played there? None other than Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney and the Beatles had their last appearance at Candlestick Park in San Francisco. So some very interesting synchronicities there. And of course, Paul McCartney is a Gemini. And I always thought that Candlestick Park, whoever Paul McCartney is, by the way, I always thought that Candlestick Park, the whole symbol of Candlestick Park was very sort of Luciferian and illuminated, right? Candlestick point. So Paul McCartney closed out the last moments of Candlestick Park. Meanwhile, yesterday at Levi Stadium, there was a death. This is Levi Stadium. This is where the 49ers play. Remember, Sun and Leo, right? There was a death at Levi Stadium, the first game played there.
there was a death. And the death was of a fan who had a heart attack, which is, the heart is symbolic of Leo. Very strange stuff. Very, very strange. Levi is strange. You know, Levi is one of the elders of the tribes of Israel. And language is really funny. I want to read this to you. I was looking up Levi today. Let me just read this to you. This is very funny. Here we go. Hold on. Funny in the sense that it's funny ironic. So, let me just read this. This is in a weird way how our world is set up. I want you to listen to this, and I want you to pay close attention to this. Because this is, in some ways, the legal and the legal and the lingua, right? The law and the tongue. So this is called Levi and the Blessing of Jacob. This is from Wikipedia. It says here, Levi's youth is marked by impetuosity. He and his brother Simeon destroy the city of Shechem. You know, I tell you, when I was a kid, me and my buddies, whenever we decided to go out and have some fun, we go out and destroy a city. That's what we do. Let's go over there and go destroy that city. In revenge for the rape of Dinah, seizing the wealth of the city and killing the men. The narrative also mentions that the brothers had earlier misled the denizens of Shechem by consenting to Dinah's rapist, marrying her. And when Jacob hears about the destruction of Shechem by Simeon and Levi, he castigates them for it. In the Blessing of Jacob, Jacob is described as imposing a curse on the Levites, by which they would be scattered in punishment for Levi's actions in Shechem. All right, let's stop there. This is called the Blessing of Levi. I'm sorry, the Blessing of Jacob. Distracted there for a minute. The Blessing of Jacob. And yet, it is a curse. He's imposing a curse on the tribe. And they'd be scattered because Levi and his brother were bad boys. But do you see the irony here? The irony is this is being called a blessing, and in reality, it's called a curse. In a lot of ways, this is sort of endemic of our own language-based spellcast matrix. I just wanted to bring this up because obviously it is not a blessing, and yet it is called a blessing. Strange. It's a strange kind of morph of this inverted duality. So anyway, they had a death at Levi Stadium, opening day. To me, when I first read that, it just felt to me like it was a sacrifice. I mean, let's say it wasn't like, hey, we're going to pick out this guy in section 222 because he's got a weak ticker and knock him off. I'm not sure quite works that way. But it felt to me like a sacrifice in the Mayan tradition. You know, here is this temple, this newly erected temple, and in section 221, there was a heart attack. And when you go back in time, and you can actually go back in time when you go to the Mayan ruins in places like Tikal and Chichen Itza, you'll see clearly engraved on the temple walls or on the walls surrounding the temple that there is human sacrifice that took place in those places. And what did they do? They removed the hearts from people directly. They removed the hearts. And so what did we have yesterday? We had a heart attack, an attack on the heart at Levi Stadium for the 49ers, which they lost, by the way. They lost the game 34-0. There's the 7, right? 7. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. Strange information. But it's also Leo, right? Leo sun, Jupiter in Leo, 7 degrees, expanding. All right, let's talk about Venus in Leo. Venus is in Leo at 7 degrees,
And one of the things that we have an opportunity to connect into, so let's talk about astrology from a personal level, and then a collective level, and then a transpersonal level. Those are the three levels that we can enter into astrology with. Excuse me. So from a personal level, we deal with the effects of Venus in our charts and in our lives. All right? Now, Venus is in Leo, so you need to go to where Leo is in your chart. You need to see where Leo is. For me, it's in the 9th house. And you would look at how Venus would impact that chart, that house, number one. And then number two, again, you would look at the angles that Venus would take on during that time when it's in that sign and moving through that house. Okay? So when you do that, then you begin to ascertain, doesn't matter what sign it's in, you need to ascertain the impact of Venus. Now in Leo, it has a unique and interesting flavor. It is the opportunity for us on a personal level to experience our relationships, Venus, with more warmth, more love, more fun in some ways. Fun. Does anyone remember what fun is? You know, fun, joviality to some extent, passion. You know, Venus and Leo it's about joie de vivre, and it's about sharing that with another person, because that's what Venus does. Venus also represents, in a lot of ways, our surroundings too, the relationships that we have with our home. So Venus and Leo would indicate that there would be a desire to make the home more comfortable, the desire to make the home more royal, you know, whether it's bringing, a fresh coat of paint in and brightening up the insides of your house, or whether it's, maybe putting in a new window in your home so you can let more sun in, right? It's a very Leo kind of thing. So Venus and Leo can also be very, very generous. If you come from your heart, you can be generous. And so Venus and Leo, brings that quality. These are all the positive aspects of Venus and Leo. So being generous, being more heart-centered, being more open, being willing to take emotional risks, living with your heart on your sleeve, especially as it relates to your partner, these are all highly, highly resonant with Venus and Leo. Now, the downside or the shadow side of Venus and Leo is arrogance, is haughtiness, because whenever we deal with Leo, it's the royal model. It is the Sun King who blesses everyone, who blesses, the land and the people through his generosity, his beneficence, his ability to reflect the qualities of the sun to his people, right? That's the Sun King. The downside of that, or the shadow side of that, is arrogance, it's conceit, it's short-temperedness, it's intolerance, all the things, it's pride, it's vanity. So the dark side of Venus and Leo is in some ways taking people and relationships with people for granted, right? So because we would just assume through our divine and royal birthright that we have access to anything that we want if we play with this model. But the fact of the matter is that is the blind side or the shadow side of Venus and Leo, that we don't always get everything that we want, or if we have what we want, we may not be fully aware or conscious of it, and we just take it for granted that it's always going to be there. That is the downside. I don't say it's the downside, it's the shadow. So when you get into Venus and Leo, where do you want to go with it? Do you want to be loving? Do you want to be fun? Do you want to be playful? Do you want to show people that you care for them and care about them? That's a really important piece of this. Or you want to go in the other direction. And what is the separator between the two? It's consciousness. It's awareness. So now you're a little more conscious, and now you're a little more aware. Venus and Leo, tell somebody you love them. What harm is that going to take? I love you. I love you. I love you. If we all did that, it might be a more interesting world. It might be an easier world to live in. Venus in Leo offers us that opportunity while it's in Leo, because it's going to go to Virgo, and that's going to shift. And Venus in Virgo is much more circumspect, much more critical. It's much more defining about who we relate to and why. So before we get to the Venus in Virgo, party killer, have fun with Venus in Leo. Live with your heart on your sleeve. What do you have to lose? And Jupiter conjunct Venus expands that. So it expands that possibility. It expands the potential of being able to do that. And on a collective level, taking it to the collective, we need that now. We need that now. We need people to be able to say, I love you. We need to reach across from each other and say, I love you. We need to transcend this duality and say, I love you. It blows somebody's mind. Hey, I don't know you. I love you, though. Maybe you should go into the supermarket today. Here's your homework. Go to the supermarket today and come up to a total stranger, look them in the eye and say, I love you. I dare you. I dare anybody to do that. I might do it. In fact, I am going to do it. I'm going to do it. So Jupiter, Leo, Venus in Leo expands the potential collectively for us to do that, to enter into a greater sense and feeling of a collective heart, right? The shadow side of that is the entitled, select group that are essentially wanting to turn most of humanity into dust. They will expand their networks. They will expand their profits. They will expand their relating for their own well-being, right? Now, when they do that, what can happen? Well, on a collective level, we can step back and say, point our fingers and say, not good. This is not cool. Not cool. One of the things that we're seeing, taking a step back and going back to Ferguson, is we're seeing the effects of the militarization of the police. They're running around there with tanks in Ferguson. And now they've created a situation. They've created that, by the way. They created that. Now, the young man caught on tape, did some stuff, not cool. Not cool. And was he resisting arrest? Maybe he was. But you don't put 6 bullets into him. Big kid. You don't put 6 bullets into him. Now, if he had a gun, it's a whole different story. But there wasn't one. And so now what they're doing is they're creating a situation where they can justify the militarization of their police. So we're expanding. Now, Leo is authority too, right? So we're expanding authority with Jupiter. And now, guess who's coming in there? The National Guard is going in there. And we're seeing, in a lot of ways, a massive overreach. A massive overreach. Because they have to justify the equipment and the money spent. Because guess what? There are going to be more communities around America that are seeing this, and politicians who are the worst of breed, by the way. They're just the absolute worst of breed. They'll see this and say, we need this for our community. Because this could happen to us too. So we need more tanks. Now, meanwhile, certain lawmakers are seeing this for what it is, and they're saying, we've got to stop this. We have got to stop arming our police force to the teeth, because this is what happens. They are literally gunning for an opportunity to use their toys. So we have this flashpoint, this duality piece. It's all happening. It's all being promulgated in programs so that we're afraid of one another, so that we're at each other's throats. That's what's happening. You know what's also interesting, too? I saw this image today, and I grabbed it. I'm going to put it up on Facebook. By the way, if you're on Facebook, you should, link up Robert Phoenix or Astrology for the Now Age, because a lot of the stuff that gets talked about here, we talk about on Facebook as well. So I found an image today online, and it is some of you may know who Janelle Monáe is. I did a piece on her a long time ago, about 3 years ago, and it was all about transhumanism.
and I found this. Didn't come up. Damn. Okay, but I found this image. I'll try to find it again. It is a group of artists, and they are in Europe, and they all happen to be black. And Janelle Monáe is front and center, and they're all wearing black and white. So they're clearly kind of, symbolizing this duality thing. And they've got their hands up in the air, like, don't shoot, like this is the new thing. It says these hands up in the air. It's like surrender. We are playing with some really weird symbols and memes right now. And by the way, that is also apparently a Freemasonic gesture as well, which again ties into this whole duality trip. So on the Gemini Moon, you could look it up. Just look up Janelle Monáe. Maybe somebody can put that in the chat room. Janelle Monáe, don't shoot. I'll bet you it comes up, right? Janelle Monae, Monáe. So there we are. This is where we're at, and it's an interesting, crazy time. And in a lot of ways, I feel so detached from it, to be honest with you. I feel really detached from it. I don't mind talking about it. I really don't, because this is what I do. But I feel pretty detached from the whole thing. I'm just watching it. It's like a movie. 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, I'd be really fired up. But now it's like, All right, so we are at 45 minutes into the show. You're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix. So why don't we do this? Why don't I play some music, and when we come back, we'll talk about the sextile, because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the sextile, the mystery of the sextile, and then after that, we'll get into some free readings. How does that sound? Does that sound good? All right, so let me play a little bit of music here. What do I want to play? I need to upload some new music. Let me see here. I think this is Mim Suleiman, Mekane. Let's play this. I uploaded this a couple of weeks ago. It's a pretty cool track. Mim Suleiman, Mekane.
در میخانه حبیبم رفتم در میخانه حبیبم خوردم دوست پیمانه خوردم دوست پیمانه من مست و تو دیوانه حبیبم من مست و تو دیوانه حبیبم ما را که برد خانه ما را که برد خانه در شهر رو یکی کس رو حبیبم هوشیار رو نمیبینم هوشیار رو نمیبینم هر یک بدتر از دیگر حبیبم هر یک بدتر از دیگر حبیبم شوریده و دیوانه شوریده و دیوانه دلبر عزیز شو خودمی برخی تو بری که جوان سازد عشقم به تو پردازد دنبه که جوان سازد عشقم به تو پردازد I'm so far
My bad. That was Susan Dehim, not Mim Suleiman. And Mekena is the track. Mekena, Susan Dehim. Okay, so you're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we have been talking all morning, pretty much, or at least for the last 45 minutes, about duality and what's taking place in Ferguson and Venus in Leo and Jupiter in Leo, the conjunction, and trying to come to some points of understanding about it all. There was something else I wanted to bring up. What was it? Oh, yeah. This is kind of what triggered it. There's a new image of Lady Gaga she put up on Instagram, and it's her dressed up like Amy Winehouse. And I've often thought for quite a while that Amy Winehouse and Lady Gaga are actually the same person. I'm not alone, by the way. There's a lot of other, crazy people out there that have the same idea. But when you see the image, they look, it could be Amy Winehouse. Let's put it that way. So this triggered this whole kind of discussion about duality and the Gemini Moon, because obviously that would be a topic for the Gemini Moon. And this whole idea around doubles and clones and impersonation and reality actors and crisis actors and all that stuff. Okay, let's get into the asterisk, the sextile, which is the cousin of the asterisk. Now, one of the things that the sextile does in the chart, more than any other sign in some ways, is that it is incumbent upon incumbent upon our acting. So we must act in order to activate the sextile. Now, the trine is something that is done easily in the chart and easily in the life. We embody the trine. So if you have a trine between two planets, then you have essentially easy flow and easy energy between those two planets. It's like you came into this lifetime with that energy, with the ability to tap into that celestial group. The sextile implies that there is an opportunity in this lifetime to access the energy between two planets that are in more or less elemental harmony. Now, there's always exceptions to the rule, but a trine will indicate that there is an angle between one planet of one sign and one planet of another sign, but they're in the same element. Earth to earth, water to water, fire to fire, air to air, right? Trines exist at a 120 degree angle, 120 degrees. The sextile is half of a trine. It is a 60 degree angle. Now, you can have an out of sign trine, or an out of element trine rather, meaning that you could have a trine with, let's say, an Earth planet, right? And you could have a trine with a fire planet. There would be an out of element trine, but perhaps the degrees are such that they actually add up to 120. It's rare, but it does happen. You can have it sometimes an out of element sextile as well. Again, it's rare, but it does happen. These sextiles take place when there are compatible 60 degree angles between two different elements, earth and water, fire and air. Trines, same elements, sextiles, complementary elements, but elements that are different. Fire, air, earth, water, 60 degrees. And what happens with a sextile is that for it to manifest in our lives, we have to activate it. We must take action. And when we take action, the sextile, the energy that's released between these two
elements is activated. It's released. And then we begin to tap into the energy and can then ride the energy, flow with the energy. We can kind of move it, guide it, direct it, whatever it is that we're doing during that activation of the sextile. That's what happens. That's what occurs. So the sextile takes some courage in some ways. Now, it's not a complete leap of faith, like say perhaps maybe an opposition. An opposition could activate a leap of faith to go from one position all the way over to the other side. That would be a leap of faith. But a sextile does require some courage. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to place my will into this situation, and as a result, I will activate it. And then the energy of the sextile is released. And generally, it's a complex sort of, or more novel type of energy, because we're blending elements with the sextile. We're blending fire and air. It can be combustible. It can be passionate. We're blending, earth and water, which is sort of the foundation, the building blocks of life. If you take clay, dry mud, and you add water to it, you get clay. And you have the building block of life. If you take fire and you add air to it, you have combustion. You have the type of energy that engines run on, combustion energy. There's a sextile operation taking place within your engine. It's exactly what's happening. Engines are based on sextiles. So the sextile is an important and often underlooked aspect. Astrologers in a natal chart will pay at times more attention to a trine, because maybe the sextile is like the minor chord of a trine. But I think the sextile is equally important because it's where it shows how the individual can activate their will and meet challenges in their life in a complementary fashion. The square will activate the will so the individual can meet challenges in their life, but it is more about challenge, and it's more about conflict, and it's more about the hard kind of aspect of one thing slamming against another thing. One element, earth and fire, slamming against another. But the sextile isn't. And the sextile can often be taken for granted in some ways. Maybe we tap into it every now and then, but, we don't fully engage it when we can or need to in our lives. And so with the transiting chart, or the transiting operation of the sky itself overlaid upon the individual, the natal chart, we can always see where a sextile is taking place in our lives. We can see where the energy that we need to tap into is at. And if we can go there, if we can commit to it, then interesting things can happen. Breakthroughs can happen. New types of realizations can occur with that sextile. So it takes courage. It takes, in some ways, a leap of faith to activate the sextile. Now, the sextile, of course, and I've posted this on Facebook, was the ancient name for the month of August. So we are in the month of the sextile. And before that, and it was named August after that in honor of Emperor Augustus. So we are living in the month of the sextile. Now, sextile has 6 sides to it, right? 6 sides, or 6 points. And you would think that August would be the 6th month, but obviously it's not. Now, the sextile is also the cousin of the asterisk, which is interesting, right? And the asterisk is the symbol of a star. So one of the things that the sextile can do, if we're looking at this from the sort of the association of the asterisk and the relation to the asterisk, is that by activating the sextile in our lives, we activate the star quality in our lives. And that the sextile actually helps us shine when we tap into it. It's
called the little star, the Asteriskos, the little star. It's interesting, the relationship between the asterisk and the sextile. And the asterisk is also used quite often in computer code as well. So if you're looking at your chart or you're doing any kind of serious work with astrology, find out where your sextiles are. Find out where they're taking place and look at the planets that are in play in your chart and in the transiting chart or in the transiting aspect to your chart. It's important. It's an important aspect, one that I think gets overlooked and needs to be taken a little more seriously. At least I think so. Especially now, if we're in a phase in a cycle where we're trying to come into some deeper form of empowerment in our lives. You need to know where the sextile is. Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we open up the phones? And we're going to start a little early here. 347-308-8995. 347-308-8995. And we'll, if you want to look at the sextile in your chart or where you might have a transiting sextile taking place, we can do that. I'd be happy to get into it and look at it. Or if you would like to have a free reading, we can do that as well. And I'd be happy to look at your chart. So 347-308-8995. That is the number to call in on. And over the weekend, I've been watching a lot of Little League baseball, since I'm kind of a baseball freak. And my pro team, is not doing well. They made a big trade. The Oakland A's made a big trade. They traded Gemini Yoenis Cespedes, the guy who'd won the home run derby 2 years in a row. They traded him. They traded him for a rental, John Lester, who doesn't even want to be with the team. He's only there for a quarter of the season. He's a free agent. He's probably going to re-sign with the Red Sox anyway. And so the A's basically gave up their star player for a rental player with the hopes that they could win the championship. Well, the funny thing is that chemistry does come into play when you play sports. And there's a whole litany of people, a group of people who believe that chemistry doesn't matter. That's all just a numbers game. And that if one player produces X amount of numbers and another player produces the same X amount of numbers, then they're essentially interchangeable. That's how a certain style of management is taking root in Major League Baseball. I think there's some things to be learned from the numbers, but really they're missing the whole human element to all of this. You just can't replace numbers for numbers. And the guy that they traded was a good player, but he was an even better person in the clubhouse. He was fun. He kept guys alive. Players on the team respected him. He was almost like the alpha male of that team. You don't trade that guy. Anyway, I've been watching Little League Baseball in lieu of my A's who are sucking wind right now. And it's fascinating to watch because girls are now really starting to make an inroad in Little League Baseball. And there's a girl that plays for the Pennsylvania team who are doing quite well. Her name is Monet Davis. And she is a pitcher, and she can throw a baseball about 70 miles per hour, which for a boy is actually very, very good. And for a girl, it's off the charts. The equivalent to that would be about a 91, 92 mile per hour fastball in professional baseball. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because these are Pluto and Sag kids. And one of the things that I've talked about is movies like The Hunger Games and Divergent, which have been created for the Pluto and Sag generation. And in both of those movies, the hero is a girl, right? It is the feminine warrior. It is Artemis. It's young Artemis, especially in the case of The Hunger Games. And so here we have Little League Baseball with Monet Davis pitching for the Pennsylvania team, and she is sort of the equivalent of the feminine heroine, Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games. Now, she's obviously different. She's from different part of the country, a different complexion, but still, nonetheless, she has that kind of quality. She's captivated, absolutely captivated the nation She's got this really long hair, braided up, and beautiful eyes, and she throws a baseball like a little Nolan Ryan. Quite something to watch, actually. And what's also really interesting is that there's a player, the Seattle Mariners, by the name of Fernando Rodney, and he has taken to having a bow and arrow sort of motion, so that when he strikes a batter out, he fires a bow and arrow into the sky. Now, he says it's for his dearly departed father. He's shooting an arrow into heaven for him. But nonetheless, these Pluto and Sagittarius kids have picked up on it, and now they're taking this bow and arrow, this invisible bow and arrow, and they're shooting it into the sky, which I think is fascinating. It's become their symbol. And I've seen this a couple of times in the Little League World Series. Now, I haven't seen Monet Davis do it yet, but that doesn't mean she won't. But it's absolutely interesting to watch from that point of view. All right, it is 1:10 here in South Central Texas. Let me give you the number again, 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. And you'll be able to call in and be able to do a reading for you or look at sextiles, either in your chart or in your chart as it relates to transits. I want to take a look at some birthdays today, see if we can find some interesting sextiles in some of these charts. So, Leo is the sign of the actor, Leo and Pisces are the great actors of our zodiac. And today is no exception. Today we have the birthday of Robert Redford, actor. Today is the birthday of Roman Polanski, who, in addition to being a filmmaker and a unsavory character, is also an actor. And today is also the birthday of Alain Robbe-Grillet, who is a French writer, screen director, writer, novelist. He was the last person to see Jim Morrison, by the way. Jim Morrison spent his last day with Alain Robbe-Grillet in Paris. So an interesting character historically. Patrick Swayze, the late Patrick Swayze, today is his birthday. Another actor, Dennis Leary. Today's his birthday. Who else in terms of acting? Let's see. Lots of people born today. Wow. A lot of people. Shelley Winters, her birthday is today. Edward Norton, it's Edward Norton's birthday. A friend of mine went to high school with Edward Norton. Went to high school with him, and actually went to junior high school with him. And he went to acting class, and Edward Norton was there. And he watched Edward Norton on stage, and he decided that he didn't want to be an actor. Today's also interesting stuff here. Wow, I didn't realize this, or maybe I did. This is a total Gemini Moon thing. There's two Gemini Moon connections here with birthdays. The first one has to do with Edward Norton. Today's also the birthday of Frances Cobain, that is the daughter of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. And Edward Norton and Courtney Love were lovers. So kind of an indirect Gemini Moon connection. Today is the birthday of Vincent Bugliosi, and Bugliosi is the lawyer of the Tate LaBianca murders. He was the public defender. He was the guy, not the public defender. He was the prosecutor going after Charles Manson, Vincent Bugliosi, and he, of course, Roman Polanski, it was his wife, Sharon Tate, who was killed in the Tate LaBianca murders. So Bugliosi and Roman Polanski share the same birthday. Fascinating stuff. Now let's check out Polanski's chart. Polanski, he has a Libra rising. Very charming man, Roman Polanski. Very, very charming. So he is a Libra rising, and his moon is in Cancer on the midheaven.
And his moon sextiles Venus in the 12th house. So here we see the moon sextile. Pluto is also sextiling Venus in the 12th house. So Venus here in Polanski's chart is in the sign of Virgo. It's at 26 degrees. And it's conjunct Jupiter in Virgo as well at 25 degrees. So what's interesting about Venus in the 12th house is what happens behind the scenes. What we don't know or can't see, right? Because that's what Venus or anything in the 12th house indicates. It's the unknown, the unseen. And with the Pluto sextile and with the moon sextile to Venus there in the 12th house, it's very interesting, doesn't it? Very, very interesting. Because when we look at Pluto and the moon conjunct the midheaven, these are two very, very esoteric and occult planets on the midheaven. They're quite dark with the Pluto-moon conjunction. And it would suggest that there would be a relationship to the underworld through the mother, right? And what was happening with Sharon Tate at the time of her death? She was pregnant, a mother-to-be. Now, would this indicate that there would be some form of, perhaps, sacrifice involved with Venus in the 12th house? Maybe. But when you look at the bigger part of Polanski's chart, with the square to Mars, Pluto square Mars, Pluto square Uranus, Moon square Mars, this is a violent chart. Very, very violent chart. Moon opposition Uranus, Uranus in the 7th house. You know, and Uranus in his chart was in Aries, 27 degrees. So he's going to experience a Uranus return, which will be interesting for Mr. Polanski, for sure. He's got Moon at 22, Cancer, right up there at the midheaven. So it seemed to me that there would have been some kind of violence in this chart. And the violence in the chart to, in some ways, how would I say this? Promote the moon. Promote the moon to the midheaven. Now, he's a filmmaker, so his Neptune is in the 11th house, and Neptune is in Virgo, and it's mostly inert. It doesn't have any major aspects to any other planets, with the exception of Chiron. And Chiron is in the sign of, where is old Chiron? Gemini. What do you know? What do you know? So Neptune, square Chiron and Gemini, of course, in the chart here would be in the, Chiron would be, it's at 3 degrees, puts it right into his 8th house. Interesting stuff for Mr. Polanski. Fascinating chart here. Vincent Bugliosi's chart, if we go back here, let's see what he's got, where the two connect. Vincent Bugliosi's chart, the lawyer, the prosecuting attorney, his chart is slightly different. Instead of Libra on the ascendant, he has Gemini on the ascendant. And his true node is right on the midheaven in Aquarius. So this is interesting because he would become known in some ways for his work promoting or being promoted by mass media, Aquarius, TV, the news, and certainly he got a lot of publicity during this time. Bugliosi also has a Moon-Neptune square. He has a square to the Moon, and with him it's Neptune. He may know more than he's letting on. Let's put it that way. And he also has Mars and Pluto in Cancer squaring Uranus. So he has Uranus at, he's a little bit older. He's got Uranus in Taurus. So he's not quite of the same generation Mr. Polanski. But interesting nonetheless that they would be both born in the same day and have some connection and consort with each other. Okay, it is 11, see, it's 1:18 here in Texas. You're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix. And I'm going to throw out the number one more time, 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. If you would like to do a free reading here, I'd be happy to do that for you. Or I could look at these sextiles in your chart, and we can explore those together. Maybe we can explore some other sextiles here through modern astrology. Let's go back into today's charts. Let's take another chart. Who do we want to look at? How about, who's interesting here? How about Robert Redford? Let's look at Robert Redford. So let's see if Redford has some sextiles. By the way, Redford looks good for his age, huh? Still does. Okay, believe it or not, I have found a chart that has almost absolutely no sextiles. Fascinating. You know, that happens every now and then. By the way, Robert Redford's sun is almost completely unaspected. Interesting. Really interesting. The first major aspect he has, if you go down the column, it's a trine to the true node, and the true node is up in the 10th house. It's right there on his midheaven. That's the only aspect that Redford has from his sun to almost any other quote-unquote planet or aspect in the chart. Fascinating. People that have no aspects to their sun, two things can occur. They can either A, usually really stand out, or B, they can be quite obscure. Now, Redford has a lot of planets in the 6th house in Virgo. So he's always been kind of socially conscious, socially aware, and connected to the environment. That's been a big kind of Redford theme in his life. But what's really interesting is that if you look at his roles, some of his more memorable roles have occurred when he's done them with other people. Now, he has Libra on the descendant, which would indicate that would be the case. But if you have an unaspected sun, it would be incumbent upon you to have somebody else help you or to bring your solar qualities out. And if we look at some of his more memorable films, they're almost always with another person. You know, we look at him with Paul Newman in not just one, but two movies, The Sting and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. You look at Redford's pairing with women, with Barbra Streisand in the Way We Were, you know, very powerful pairing between two people. We look at his connection with Brad Pitt in Spy Games or Patriot Games. So he needs another person. Jane Fonda, Electric Cowboy. He needs another person. Meryl Streep, Out of Africa. He needs another person for his unaspected sun to shine. And he's done some good films where he's been kind of on his own, but they're not as popular as films he's done with other people. You know, we look at The Candidate, an early Redford film. It's a good film, but it's not one of his more popular films. 3 Days of the Condor, one of my favorite movies, but again, not an incredibly popular film. And even then, he had a strong connection with Faye Dunaway, who was the heroine of that movie. So the unaspected sun, Redford's chart has no sextiles. I picked the one chart out of all these charts with absolutely no sextiles. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that he came into this lifetime with pretty much everything he needed to bring into fruition. And did he need to take any risks? I don't know. Did he need any activation? Of course, he's going to get it with the sextile as it transits through his chart. But I'm not sure. And if you look at his life, you know, he's lived a fairly charmed life in some ways. fairly charmed life. He's got Saturn in 12th house in Pisces, and I would say that he's probably never been all that comfortable with the film world because Pisces, of course, rules film and movies. And Saturn in 12th would indicate somebody who needs to get away and hide out from it all to a large extent. Fascinating chart. No sextiles, and I picked it. Let's see if we can find another one just from today's charts. How about Dennis Leary, the fiery actor, the caustic stand-up comedian? Does he have sextiles? He has, believe it or not, he has a few. Not many, though. Again, this is a chart that's based mostly on trines and squares. The sextile that he has is a Jupiter-Saturn sextile. And he's got a Sun-Neptune sextile. Okay, that's an interesting one. That is an interesting one because, again, his Sun is not entirely well aspected, or at least prominently aspected. He has a square to the Moon, which would be difficulty between father and mother, and difficulty between his masculine and feminine based on his relationship with his mother. But he has a strong Moon as well, lots of trines. And he has the sextile to Neptune. Now, Dennis Leary was a stand-up comic for quite a long time. And then eventually he made a transition to film. And I would bet you that transition for him was not easy because he would have had to have taken a risk. He would have had to have dealt with this, this whole concept of Hollywood Babylon and doing movies and selling out his soul. This would have been kind of a big moment for him when he crossed over from being just a straight stand-up comedian and into doing film. I think his first film was The Referee. I think that's what it was. He has Jupiter in Libra, and that is up in his 8th house. So that's where the scales take place, a.k.a. The Referee. So I believe it would have been a challenge and a risk for Dennis Leary to move into that medium because film and stand-up are two very, very different things. One is much more immediate, much more in the now, much more about timing and the relation for the audience, whereas film is much more, in some ways, stagnant. You sit around a lot with film. So he had to take a risk, and I guess it panned out pretty well for him because he wound up being the film actor. Easy to do. All right, so we have some people here that want to talk and want their charts looked at, or maybe they want to get into the sextile. Let's see who they are. Hello there, you're on the air. Thank you for calling in.
Hello, Robert. This is Eric over in Virginia.
Hey, what's happening, E?
It's just a rainy day here. I was wondering maybe if you could look at my chart and see what you might view for me professionally.
Okay. So what's going on with your work life? What's happening with your career?
Well, I'm completing the transition out of my job at the end of this month, and I'm continuing to interview for a few jobs, but there's nothing concrete yet. I had a tour of a local company this past week on Tuesday, and it was someone I knew 12 years ago at my previous job who was the CEO at that time, and now he's kind of a head honcho of a local office of a larger company.
Mm-hmm.
So he seemed pretty eager to see if I might be able to fit into their company, but I'm not trying to make any assumptions about that yet. But I'm cautiously optimistic that might work out, but I'm not sure yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's play with this whole thing around the sextile. The sextile, you don't have a lot in your chart, by the way. You have a few, and they're mostly to your true node, and we can kind of get into those a little bit. But your main sextile is from Mars to Jupiter. So you've got Mars in Gemini, and Mars in Gemini, especially with your midheaven. Gemini on the midheaven indicates two career paths, or two potential sort of tracks in one's life, or multiple tracks when it comes to career. And Mars in the 10th house certainly is a bit restless, and there will be a turnover in terms of career and direction in the person's life with Mars and Gemini. They need to keep learning. They need to keep growing. They need to keep actualizing themselves in ways where they can get more knowledge, more information, more novelty. So that's going to be kind of a player, in your chart throughout the entirety of your life. With the sextile to Jupiter in the 8th house, we're talking here about what's hidden from you, right? And what's hidden from the rest of the world, because that's what the 8th house does. And Jupiter is in Aries in your 8th house. So we're talking about, you and I have kind of gone around this a couple of times. Aries tend to have, and I've experienced this with Aries, they tend to have the hottest hands of anybody in the zodiac. Aries have amazing healing hands. They don't really know what to do with them, but they have them. And so when we get into Jupiter down in the 8th house, which is Scorpio, right, it's regeneration. It's regeneration. That's what Scorpio does. It regenerates. Jupiter expands. So we're talking about the expansion of regeneration. And we're talking about heat, heat, Aries, the hands. And then there's Chiron there. And what is Chiron? Chiron is the healer of the chart. It's the wounded healer. So your Mars would be in a very wide sextile with Chiron, but in a much closer sextile with Jupiter. And so, your Chiron, the energy that you have to face is interesting because, I believe that you're a healer. And I know that you've got to go out and make money and have and support yourself. But when you've got Virgo on the ascendant and Sun and Virgo in the 1st house, that's the sign of the healer. And when we get into your 8th house, Aries, that's where your quote-unquote male energy or your masculine energy is hanging out. It's in the 8th house. It's below the surface. But it's also connected to your ability to heal yourself and heal other people. That's what Chiron does. And and when we get into Aries, it's kind of like, for men it can be difficult, because for men in Aries it's like, well, I've got to go out and do a male thing. I've got to go out and rule the world or be a CEO or whatever that thing is, right? It's kind of like the superficial rendering or the generic rendering of what being a man is. But Chiron in Aries says we have to kind of re-examine that. We have to we have to go deeper into what really being a man is, because that's what Aries is about, masculine energy. It's about using the will. So your will, your masculine energy, it's in the 8th house. And so for you to get it, to tap into it, and to tap into it in a big way, because Jupiter's there, you've got to go there. And how do you get there? You get there with a sextile, right? You've got to you make that leap. You make that leap. Say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put myself out there in this way. So what I would do, my professional advice to you, would be while you are winding down, I would start making a bridge. I would start trying to figure out, hey, can I really do this? Can I really help people? I've got these certifications. I've done Reiki. Maybe I need to go out and get a massage therapist license. Maybe that's where I can actually put some hands on people. This is what I'd be doing right now, because you've got Gemini on your midheaven. You may as well multitask and multi-track. So keep your options open, because maybe somebody comes through and gives you the job that pays your bills and takes away a lot of your fears and doubts, which we all need, by the way, because it's a lot easier to be in the world when you have resources than you don't. But at the same time, if you really want to tap into your own authenticity, that sextile, that's where the risk is. That's where you take that leap. To go into the 8th house, or maybe it goes the other way. You get in your 8th house and then you take the leap and you move it up to the 10th, and that's where your Mars is. Now you're activated. But I think it's the other way around, to be honest with you. So my sense here, continue to do what you do, but build a bridge. Do something else on the side. Take some time out. Get some business cards made. Create a website. Think of what else you can do to augment your ability to heal. Maybe you need another certification. Maybe you need something legit, like a massage therapist license. If it takes you 3 months to do that, you may still have a little bit of cash on the side and some unemployment money, and next thing you know, you've got your massage therapist license, you're certified, you're legit. That's what Virgo and the Ascendant needs in some ways. So you've got it. You've got your tools. And now you have a backup plan. Think of it as a backup plan, not as an alternate career path, but a backup plan. And that way you can begin to,
supplement your income with doing some stuff that you, I think, really like, and 2, are really good at. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. That's really interesting. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Good? Are we good? Okay, thanks, Eric. And hang in there, all right?
All right, we'll do. You too. Take care.
All right. See you. Hello there. Hello. Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. Okay, put you back on hold. All right, you are listening to Navigating the 11th House. About that. Now, you're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix. And tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play one more little piece of music. We've got about 25 minutes left in the show. And I'll play something short. And if you want to call in and have me look at your chart, definitely do that. Some sextiles, we can definitely do that. Let's have sextile together. How about that? This is Robert Phoenix, and kind of off my wig today. What do I want to play? How about, let's see, how about testing 1, 2, 3? Testing 1, 2. I like this track because it scorches, and it's only 3 minutes and 6 seconds long. You're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix. Testing 1, 2, 3. You're listening to the 11th House Radio, and I'm Robert Phoenix, and we have a caller from Austin. Hello there.
Hi. It's Megan.
Hey,
No longer from Austin, but still the
right.
same number.
Paul from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who's turning into a movie star.
Oh, quit it. Not really, but.
How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing really good. Just a ton of change. And recently, I think the Jupiter out of Cancer into Leo did something over here. So I'd love for you to check that out and whatever stands out to you, because there's been so many changes, rather.
Something good, hopefully.
Yeah, it feels good. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people have been digging on this Jupiter into Leo thing.
Yeah, definitely. It was almost like a light for me. I felt the switch happen. It was kind of profound.
A lot of it's coming out of the sort of the darkness, because now Jupiter, if we just look at the chart in general, right? Jupiter is on the ascent now. It's come out of the fourth house in the chart in general. And when it does, it's emerging literally kind of into the light and moving towards the chart's midheaven in Capricorn. So, you know what? I don't know if I have your data here. Let me get you into the system again.
Yeah.
We'll get your stats.
How are you handling the heat over there? A little warm? Warm enough for you?
I managed to escape it for a week, and now here we are. And I'm like a lizard, man. I spend the entire day in my apartment working, and then I come out at night. Even the nights are pretty torpid. So, what's your birthday again? Megan, no, it's April.
Yep, it's 04/19/1968.
Okay, so April 19th.
Yep.
1968.
And I was born in Burlington, Vermont.
Right. What time?
11:09.
That's in the AM? Right.
Yes.
All right. And how is Josh doing there?
He's doing incredible.
Good.
Yeah. He got hooked right in and very busy and happy, making friends. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Nice to see
Working
you.
out, thank goodness. Yeah. We leaped off the cliff and it worked. So far,
all right. Let's go to your chart now. A lot of Burlingtons. Burlington. There it is. Okay.
So many Burlingtons.
There are. Well, Jupiter for you is in the first house, right? I mean,
yeah.
So it's going to come out of your 12th house and it's going to emerge into your first house. So you're going to be more visible. You're going to be more confident. People will, as long as you're coming from your heart, people will want to be around you. And you're slated to have a Jupiter return, and that'll happen next year. It'll be in your second house, which means your finances will improve considerably. So that's all good. And Jupiter is in a, let's see, it's going to sextile. Actually, it is sextiling. Trining your Venus in Aries. So Jupiter's at 7, you have Venus at 13, so it's in a trine, and that's good, right? We like that?
Yes.
The closer that Jupiter gets to trining your Venus, and then trining your Saturn, and then trining your midheaven, to me it feels like you're going to be able to take more risks. And you're generally a risk taker anyway with all that fire and Aries in your chart, right? So, but I like it, and you're basically meant to actualize yourself and do what you want and need to do for yourself in this world. And your true node is conjunct your midheaven, so there is something here about you taking yet another kind of leap in some ways, not necessarily the same leap you took when you went to Albuquerque, but a leap nonetheless. I would say, that you have the stars on your side right now, and any type of, self-actualization work that you want to do is highly, highly promoted. So anything that's going to promote you, Megan, is going to be good, because we're dealing with your personal planets, we're dealing with your true node, and we're dealing with your first house, which is where Jupiter is. So obviously the key here is to have fun, to enjoy yourself, to follow your passion. That's another piece.
because Jupiter and Leo, especially in the first house, is extremely passionate. So follow your passion. Wear your heart on your sleeve. Follow your love. I know it sounds cliche, but it's going to be fine. And if you want to continue to do some of the acting stuff, stay with that. But the Jupiter-Saturn trine would indicate, because you're going to have that, would indicate something a little more formal. Maybe that would be maybe you join SAG, or and you become part of the actors union, or maybe you get an agent, or maybe this is what we're talking about here. So whatever it is that will help you formalize this in a constructive way would be quite good. The only thing that I see as a bit of a downside would be next year when you have the Jupiter return, and it also squares Neptune in your chart, which means that you'll have to make some choices. And you'll have to make some choices around sort of your roots and your home again. So there's a potential that you maybe at some point next year might actually move again, believe it or not. So maybe you decide to keep going west and just go to Los Angeles. I mean, that's a possibility, depending on how all this goes. So follow it. You've got the moon in your sails, and your relationship will continue to kind of grow and glow and get deeper, right? Because that's what Jupiter trine Venus does. And you'll also pick up a few admirers too. People will get turned on to who you are and what you do, and so that's just an aspect of the Jupiter-Venus trine. It happens. It takes place. So, and also with Jupiter-Venus, you would also be meeting people where you would have opportunity to possibly do some teaching as well, because you've got planets up in your 9th house, which is the house of the teacher. So who knows? Maybe you might decide to take a few students on or become somebody else's student. Whatever that is, Jupiter accents that for you. So that's good. But the formalization piece is going to be interesting, because at some point Jupiter and soon, by the way, by the end of the year, Jupiter will say you need to be more formal. You need to bring Jupiter and Saturn together, because that will help you with your midheaven, and it will help you with your true node and all that good stuff.
Could you just talk a little bit about that true node in the midheaven, and because I get confused as to what that means.
Well, generally speaking, when we talk about the 10th house, it's a public house, and people that have their Sun or Jupiter or Mercury, sometimes Saturn, and the true node, they tend to be public people. So they're out there. They are, they need to be out there. They have something to share, whatever that aspect is, right? So I have, my true node is conjunct my midheaven as well. And it's in Virgo, right? So what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to help people. That's Virgo, service. This is what I do. I'm doing it right now. Your true node is about the activation of the self, because that's what Aries is. And so it's risk-taking, number one, and it's showing people what happens when you do take a risk. It's showing people what happens when you do actualize the self. So part of this is with your true node is, hey, look at me. I'm out there. I'm doing this. This is how it's impacted my life. I've activated my will, and I'm showing you what it looks like when it happens. And theoretically, it would inspire other people to do the same, right? So Jupiter trining your midheaven, Jupiter trining your true node would give you more confidence and more encouragement towards that end. And it might be taking a larger risk, or it might be formalizing the fact that you've done this and saying, hey, over here, this is what I've done and this is how I've done it. So I think it's important, and I think you have something to share with the world towards that end, because you have your Sun in the 10th house as well, and it's in Aries, aneretic degree, but it's still in Aries. So you are a public person, and it's like, well, what are you going to do with it? That's really what it comes down to.
It's interesting because I actually have a side that's totally shy and not interested really in that, but I have another side that's okay with it. Almost like it's inevitable.
Well, yeah, certainly. Yeah, because when you when you get into signs, you also have to take into account the sign that's opposite that sign. So for you, it would be Libra with all the Aries stuff. And not that Libra is a shy sign, but it is in some ways more circumspect than Aries, because Libra is kind of always looking for some form of permission. It's always looking for permission from the other, from the partner, from the culture, from
the parents.
From the parents, because that's what Libra is like. Okay, can I do this? Can I do this? Okay, I can do this. Good. Aries, that's not what Aries is about. Aries is, I'm going to do this. So, and you are heavily stacked in Aries. So when that occurs, you may feel naked. You may feel like you're pushing against the opposite, which would be Libra. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Feels very exposed, and I don't like that feeling. But at the same time, the Leo's like, hey, I'm here.
Right.
Hey, world.
Yeah. And so, anyway, I would say that whatever brings you more of a sense of formalization around this and around your current path, that is the way that you need to go. When I say formalization, that means with Saturn, you say, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to take these steps that in some way legitimize me in the eyes of other people. That's Saturn. I'm going to take these steps, and Jupiter promotes that and says, go, do, be. Make it take those steps. You have the energy to do it. The wind is at your sails.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Robert, as always.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's great to hear your voice.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely same. And thanks. I always appreciate your insights on things.
You're welcome. And I got to tell you, I think you got out of Austin at the right time, because it is absolutely exploding here. And I know that you saw it coming. And I got here, and I was really at the beginning of that. And it is just off the charts in terms of the growth. And I mean, if you go down 35 and head towards San Antonio, there's not a stretch of highway where there isn't a sign that does not say that the land is for lease or for sale or for whatever.
Yeah.
So
I heard too that you can't count how many cranes there are in downtown with all the buildings going up. That there's just crane after crane. It's crazy. Yeah. No, I felt it, and I couldn't be happier because it was getting suffocating. So I'm really grateful that we were able to make it happen.
Well, good on you, and I know that wasn't an easy choice, but you activated all those Aries planets, and you got it done, so congratulations.
Thank you. You are a good encouragement for it, too, so appreciate you.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Take care.
Yay, have a great day. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, that's Megan Prescott-Mouton, who is actually a guest on the show. She's written a wonderful children's book about grieving and grief and loss. And we had her on as a guest one time, and she's moved on to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where she was an extra in a movie. Go figure. I think with Viggo Mortensen, of all people, huh? Not too shabby, eh? All right, it is 1:52 here in Austin, Texas, and I think we've pretty much ran out of time. We've come to the end of 2 hours of 11th House Radio. So I want to thank everybody for chiming in and either calling in or being in the chat room or listening through the stream or through the podcast or through the YouTube manifestation of this. Thank you, as always. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Friday with the Friday Forecast. Guest to be determined. I've got a few candidates. We'll figure it out between now and then. I guarantee it'll be interesting. All right, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible, and always may the stars be on your side. I'll be back on Friday again. Have a great day. See you later.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.